All right, another episode in the can. Oh, wait, we haven't done it yet. Welcome to Bolded Slugs. I am Zeus Ryan. Today, we have Scott Ledger on the program. And as we were just talking briefly before we began, a week or so ago when we scheduled this, didn't know what the hell we were going to talk about. And then suddenly, as if by fate, here we are. So the first question that I want to jump into immediately is... of all the industries that exist where professionals could bequeath their expertise to those behind them or wanting to break into said industry, quite frankly, why are a lot of people in the screenwriting industry a bunch of assholes?
Oh, this is a perfect and great question. There's a lot to unpack here. I'm coming from screenwriter Twitter jail. Where the warden...
Are you in jail? No.
The warden just left and the guards are being nice. My cellmate is in the yard, so it's okay. But I do want to start all of this by making an apology to Tom. I was a little out of pocket. I should have attacked his ideas. I attacked him a little bit, and I'll try to do better next time.
We love a little bit of ad hominem here, but
there's room for growth and improvement. And again, I just, I do want to apologize, but also I think I'm going to say further critical things in the next 4 seconds. So, I think both things can be true, right? We can attack someone's ideas and not attack them as a person. And I will try to do better next time. That said, there's a lot here. And the thing that was interesting to me about this is that I felt like I was seeing something very, very different from what other folks were seeing. Because on the surface, this is like such the advice that was espoused is so like brain numbingly obvious that to me, you cannot even like classify it as education. You have to classify it as marketing. And when you see it as marketing, that's when things start to click. So it's like, you're on Twitter, right? And you're scrolling through Twitter and then you'll see some like bikini babe account, right? And they'll post like 2 photos and, and they're both like these very like risque poses or whatever. And then the caption will say like, which photo do you like more? Like photo number 1 or photo number 2? And then everyone will start saying number 1 and number 2, number 1, number 2. And then the 2s will start arguing with the 1s. And then you'll see it in your feed and you'll be like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. Clearly she looks better in photo number 1. And then you comment.
Why would you argue that? It is objective and verifiable.
Yes. And then suddenly the algorithm has boosted this content and it has sailed around the world. And so to me, the only way to kind of properly read this whole kind of chapter was as a very successful marketing endeavor. And I was the dummy and I fell for it. I was dummy number 1. I fell for it worse than anyone else. Right. But I think, I want to be careful about the language that I use here because I'm trying to be in less trouble and not more trouble. But the thing that
you picked the wrong show to come on, my brother. Because if you're going down, I'm going down with you. But I appreciate the professionalism. Please continue in your resolved tone.
Again, both things can be true, and I deeply respect anyone, obviously, who's dedicated themselves as a teacher, anyone who is sharing their knowledge, and I do think that's valuable. And the stuff that I was kind of, railing against for me is this idea that, so I saw another writer on Twitter whom I deeply respect and I love their work and I've watched their work and, I'm a fan. And they sort of said in so many words, not directly to me, but kind of in my vicinity, meet me at the playground after school.
Yeah,
and so
you should see my DM from that same person.
This is someone with the show on Netflix.
Okay, sorry.
Yes,
sorry.
Oh, I know. No,
this is a different guy with a show
person,
on Netflix.
That individual. The term was unhinged attacks, and I have to look up to see if that's an LLC that's available, because I think like Unhinged Attacker Productions has
I'll
like
tell you right
a
now,
nice ring to it.
when I was coming up with the name for this particular show, I
Yeah.
was like, what is the dumbest goddamn name for a
You found
screenwriting
it. No,
writing
it's
show
perfect.
is
No, it's
Bolded
perfect.
Slugs.
The only thing better than your name is the logo. The logo is like the most inspired piece of graphical art that I've seen
if I
in
could
I
take
don't even know how long.
a quick second. She hasn't been
Yeah.
on the show yet. I'm tracking her down because she's a busy lady. But shout out to Leah from South Dakota.
Yes,
She is
Leah.
I
nailed
changed
it.
two
Crushed it.
things. I made the background black and I colored the slug red. I will link on the page the original logo that she gave me. It was a green one. She knocked that out.
The colors are nice.
She was a wonderful participant, and she did it for nothing but like, you know, Cocoa Puffs and smiles, and I'll have her on the show. But I appreciate that, and
collaboration takes many forms, right?
But I want to take a quick step back about the argument.
Sure.
For those of you not that don't have the benefit of being imminently online in the screenwriting discourse, the argument here isn't horizontal writing, vertical writing, chunks writing, white space. That's not the argument, because I read your follow-up thread. I think I liked every single one because I agreed with it, because the thing that I see, and there was another tweet today by another person who runs a podcast, and he follows me, I follow him, I respect it. But the notion is that we don't get to play with the professionals' tools.
Yes.
That the lower level people need to know what the rules are and follow them hook, line, and sinker, because you don't know what to break. But my argument, when we are shown scripts of James Cameron's Aliens, or you did Tony Gilroy's Michael Clayton.
Yes.
My argument is,
which is perfection, right?
Which it is. But my argument is, they weren't always James Cameron and they weren't always Tony Gilroy. You mean to really tell me that Tony Gilroy and James Cameron followed the fucking rules the very first script they wrote? No, they wrote what they wanted to.
Yes. And here's the thing, is that path is long and hard. And we need to be really clear about that. If you are a learning, growing, budding artist, the industry is going to break your heart a million times. And I don't think we need industry advocates to help with that heartbreak.
The gatekeeping is fine on its own. We don't need a 3 billboards outside of whatever county. I forget the movie, but you get it.
Sure. Yes. And to me, that was kind of the thing. And also, you know, I mean, the reason that I was upset, and if anyone felt like I was, you know, over the top or out of pocket or whatever, go to the original tweet, go to Franklin Leonard's quote tweet, and get back to me. And that was, you know, it was the sort of thing that, like, I read it and I could not believe that a person spoke to Franklin Leonard that way, who of course founded the Blacklist. And like, by my account, I just met him the other week and he was just super sweet and gracious. And
as much as I crap on the Blacklist, I have heard nothing but absolute wonderful things about Franklin Leonard. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. I hate your platform. You're clearly a cool dude. Please post more about soccer.
But I do think, like, the Blacklist, not in terms of the evaluation side, which is, you know, kind of like the business branch. And there's like many conversations that we had about that. I think overall it's good. It, you know, whatever. The Blacklist, in terms of like the circulating script that goes around, I think that has launched more writers' careers than the collective of collegiate professors in the United States. So to see someone being, in my estimation, very rude, very obnoxious, very dismissive, and just repeatedly so, just irked me. And to me, that was it. And it was done and it was over. And then when the cantankerousness came back to me, I was not good at deflecting it. And we will try to do better next time. But to me, here's the thing. There was one word in this that set me off. And that word was inviting. And I just think that is the most anti-art and insidious and just backward ass way to view any piece of art, and I got some great texts from friends, and people were sweet, and a few reached out, and whatever.
Right.
But someone said it so perfectly, like, you would never go into an art museum and look at two paintings side by side that were like these master paintings, and you would never cross your arms and go, which one's more inviting?
Which one lets you stare at it better?
Right. That's not, and I think, to me, this is the entirety of the crux of the argument that I was trying to make, is that greatness is comfortable taking up space. And greatness sometimes does so in its own way. And again, it's like, here's the thing too, and my brain's at like a million different places. Everyone knows this, right? This is where it's like, to me, it's marketing. To me, it's like do you like photo number 1 or photo number 2? Because this is such just an obvious thing that, like, your screenplay cannot be like the Jack Kerouac on the road scroll. It can just, it cannot be dense text. And we all know that. And anyone, even the most like novice writer, like, they open up Final Draft, and Final Draft does this like for them. It creates the white space for them. So this is just so obvious. And then even if it wasn't obvious, you could spend months, years writing a script, and then get to the end, and in like 5 minutes just hit the enter key a few times, and then you're set.
I appreciate the idea, and
yes,
this is so super theoretical, because in practice it just doesn't, for me, hold any water, because the whole point of a script. Now, if you're telling me blocky text looks bad, I'm going to say, well, what are you reading, a book? Because that's kind of what it's supposed to do. If you're reading a script, I understand that there are the quote unquote unfilmables, things in your head that you can do in a book, but you can't do in a screenplay, because the idea is that it is, at the end of its life, supposed to be filmed. So you translate certain things from the page to the screen. So there are some things you should leave out, thus opening up the space a little bit more. But I completely disagree with the notion that white space for its own sake is what writers should be doing. And I think that was also part of the argument, or at least the side that I read, was like, that was the inviting part. And it's like, right, you're losing so much in what the writer is trying to do in the story they're telling by saying, oh, also don't forget to lop these unnecessary words off, and then hit enter 5 or 6
and
times.
Just in the simplest terms, well, screenplays are interesting because they are both an art form and a blueprint for a piece of art that is yet to be made. So they kind of exist in both spaces.
Could be a bit of a transitional object.
Yes. But to me, it's like this idea that I stake my life and my career and my my hour of free time when the warden lets me roam around outside, that every script that ever sold or ever won an award in the history of Hollywood, it was because of the black ink on the page and not the white space. And so if we are telling young developing writers to, if we're bequeathing this phobia that executives might skim or skip your script, and you should worry about the space over the ink, to me, that is fundamentally backwards. I have never read a young writer script where I thought, oh, their number one concern right now is their spacing. It's always the essence of it. And to me, it's like, that's where this discussion really, like, to me, it becomes insidious, because it becomes this idea of you're sharing this anxiety with these new writers, and they already have a host of anxieties, and they already have a lot to learn and to grow, and it's a long path, right? And to make them think, and white space, it's an element of writing, but it is not the writing. No one has ever read a script and said, oh my god, the white space was perfect. No, you're thinking about the dialogue and the characters and the text that is there, not the absence of the text. So to tell us, and yes, the graphical shape of a screenplay is important. And yes, the rhythm and all those sort of things are important. But to me, the important thing with the Michael Clayton script is that most screenplays have white space.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you look at that first page, your brain goes, what the fuck is this? And you get morbidly curious about that big chunk of text at the top. And your brain starts reading the first sentence.
Absolutely.
And then the writing is dynamic and it leads you to the next sentence and the next one. And then you see this huge chunk of dialogue and your brain again goes, what the fuck is that? And then you start reading it and it's incredible. And then suddenly 2 hours have gone by and you've read the whole script.
Because the intention is that you want them to turn the page.
Yes.
That is, if there's anything that young writers, new writers, pre-emerging, whatever term, because that's where I am, right? Mm-hmm. I'm the guy that is listening to all of these things top down. And the thing that I hear the most is nothing matters other than getting them to turn the page. And I'm like, well,
yes,
I'm with you. And sure. But if you're telling me that there is a dynamic way to do that, I'm going to go look at Michael Clayton as an example. Mm-hmm. Right? I think I told you my favorite movie of all time is The Lion in Winter from 1968. Mm-hmm. For those of you scoring at home, I was born in 83. This movie was on stage and it lived a life before I even ever showed up. You look at that script now, it's like 140 pages. It reads like an encyclopedia, but for me, the things that I pulled out were the dialogue, the characters, mm-hmm. because if you watch that film, read the play, what have you, it snaps you into mm-hmm. its world from the jump. The denseness and the white space is immaterial to basically the whole frickin' work. So
and to be fair, there's certain generational things where the medium has changed and people's standards have changed, our attention spans have changed, and you should cater to that. But here's the thing, and this is where I genuinely just don't understand the argument that's being made. I don't think that 4 single isolated lines of description are any more or less skippable than a paragraph of 4 sentences in a condensed chunk. I just do not believe that your eye is any more or less likely to read as you're skimming. And I think there's infinitely many reasons why a reader might skim. Sometimes we just go from one chunk of dialogue to the next.
For sure.
And then if you're confused, then you kind of go back and you read those couple of lines. But sometimes you're kind of like blowing through the story and you're into it and you just want to know what these people say to one another. And you don't need to know that he picks up the cigarette and he puts it down and then he lowers the window and then he does, it's like, you're like, yeah, I get it, whatever. And so I just fundamentally disagree with that thesis that, a certain writing style is going to be more or less likely to get readers to skim. I think readers skim for an infinitely many number of reasons, and most of them are out of your control. And I think that you should obviously take basic steps to ensure that your writing is jumping off the page at mm-hmm. every single moment, and that you are grabbing the attention of the reader at the start and never letting go. But the way in which you go about doing that is deeply personal to your work, and it's deeply unique to your sensibilities. And every time someone tries to say, well, it's wrong, you can't do that, someone goes and does it. And so I just think it's ridiculous to try to police the way in which great writing presents itself. Great writing is great writing is great writing. And we know it when we see it. And such an element of it is the confidence of it, the confidence to take up space as needed. And I think great writing knows it's great and it's comfortable with it. And it's not concerned with inviting anyone in to recognize its greatness. It's just standing on its own 2 feet and it's standing firm and it's allowing you to enter. It's not blocking you. It's not resistant to a reader, but it's not auditioning for them in a pick me, please pick me kind of.
I was literally
energy.
thinking a lot of this is very color by numbers, paint by numbers. Like if you do this, if you limit your, because I've heard this too, and I've even written things this way. You limit your action lines to 4 lines and absolutely no more. Your dialogue, don't make everything a monologue. And we're sitting here talking 15, 20 minutes into this conversation, not in a negative way, but sir, you just went on a monologue. And I guarantee you that's
Sure.
at least 2 pages worth of you just
Sure.
off the cuff.
Oh, I monologue a lot. Yeah.
but this really, to me, says this is how people talk. This is how people communicate, and we are trying to distill things mm-hmm. into an entertaining package. Mm-hmm. and I think we're getting too color by numbers too. We're not making scripts as an art form to be communicated visually. We're making brochures for fucking like beach resorts, and we're going to start arguing where the copyright logo on the first page goes, and whether or not you include your name or you leave it off, like, or God forbid we start talking about the font of the title on the front page. Like, we'll skip that one. I won't even go
equally
there.
Silly. Yes, of course. But no, but you're right. But it's I think the easy answer and the right answer is that you can obviously do both. You can write a document that is compelling and that is interesting and rewarding to read, while also following industry norms to create a blueprint that will be advantageous to your career or to the selling of that document. These are not mutually exclusive things. And the way in which you go about doing that, again, is personal and unique. And every time someone says you can't do X, someone does X and it works. And so I think that is the important thing that, you know, and it's like you said, it's like, you know, I'm sure when Quentin Tarantino was young, he was writing, and then someone would say like, well, you know, you can't do that. You're not Martin Scorsese. And he would be like, well, fuck you, I'm Quentin Tarantino. And so that was the other thing with Mr. Tom that really, like, that when he said kind of point blank in what I felt like was kind of like a sad way, where he's like, well, I'm not as good as Tony Gilroy. It's like, well, of course, like, none of us are, but like, don't believe that. Like, believe that you are an equal, and like your work will rise to that level through sheer just kind of like determination. And like the more, and so that was kind of the whole thing where I felt like do not put up a block between you and the masters. If they did something, you can do something. You can use their tools, you can absorb their insights, and like that gap doesn't need to exist. And of course it does, you know, of course, like we are not as good as Tony Gilroy.
No,
but like, you don't have to believe that, and believing that does not serve you. And it stands in the way of great writing, because great writing is that confidence. It's that unyielding confidence to take up space, break the rules, do what needs to be done for the reader, for the audience, for the film. And it's courageous, and it does, again, you know, another monologue, but like it does not worry. It's not a vampire, and it doesn't have to be invited in.
No, and on to that point is I very much agree with the notion that, well, there's a couple things that come to my mind. One, no one can really honestly agree on even what the rules are, whether or not who broke them when, and what level they were when they did it. So putting even that part aside, the thing that I really want to focus on is the point where you're like, if you want to be a master, if it walks like a master, talks like a master, it's a master, bro. I don't care whether you've got 30 scripts under your belt or 5. Walk into that room and own your shit. There is no argument here, I think, anyone is making that the work itself can't be good. Study basics, start formatting script, like get the parameters of the sandbox that you are playing in. Make sure the work can uphold to the mildest of scrutiny. But at the same time, if someone comes in and says, well, you're not Tarantino, and I was like, I don't care. I'm me. I'm you. You're, you know, and own that, because the thing that I hear, and I laugh because it's stupid, because I don't know what it means, but I say it because it's funny, is be undeniable. If you are undeniable in enough public spaces, they arrest you. So let's just pump the brakes a little bit on what that means. But I think what you're
But we know it when we see it, right?
But we know it when we see it. And if you act like it, and if you own it, that is something that people can pick up on in a room if you're pitching. That is something that people can pick up when they read it. And I wanna ham-fistedly pivot. Normally, this would be the section where I would do pick a fight, where we talk about something in the industry you hate. We did that, so I am going to pivot to how does it feel? Well, I was going to say we're gonna do the reverse, and we're gonna do a good thing. How does it feel to be on the Stunt List Originals Bureau with Our Lady Queen of Los Angeles? Tell me about that.
Yes. So it's a great pivot, and thank you. And it's that script particularly. This is like the most perfect segue. That script is 182 pages.
Ooh, big boy.
And it's full of white space. This is like, I cannot tell you how much white space is all over this fucking script. So this is like, we're all hypocrites, and here we are. And hi, hello, nice to meet you.
Love it. Tell me more.
The thing that everyone says, they open the PDF and they're like, what the fuck? Right? It's that same thing. You look at the text, you go, what the fuck? What the fuck is this? What are you doing? Explain yourself. And then they start reading it. And then, 2 hours or so go by and they're like, oh, that was great. And so to me, it's like, I don't know if you know the card game Hearts.
Oh, hearts, spades, love it. Oh, absolute
Okay,
pastime. I'm
so
from the Midwest, dude. What do you think?
Yeah, you see,
I'm a step away from cribbage, bro.
I don't know. The point, if you don't know Hearts, the point of Hearts is you want to get rid of the hearts, right?
Yep.
But there's also, you want to score low points. So if you have 3 hearts after a round, you get 3 points. But there's something you can do where you try to get all the hearts and the Queen of Spades, and that's called shooting the moon. And as a kid, I would always try to shoot the moon because it was way more fun. And the thing that happened with this script is like, I started breaking a couple rules, and then it was like, well, what if I just broke all of them? And so instead of trying to only break 1 or 2 and have like a low score in hearts, I was like, I'm going to shoot the fucking moon.
Just pick them off in rapid succession.
Yes. Let's just collect all of the tropes, all of the things that you're not supposed to do, and put them into one storytelling document. And I cannot tell you, Zeus, this script, because I've written normal kind of industry scripts, and people have read them and nothing much has happened. This one, where I just took my nuttiest, wildest, most out there swing and told like the most personal, just naked story that I could. This has resonated with people in a way that like I can't even begin to describe. And like it's traveled further than any of my other work by such a wide margin. It's such an outlier of all the stuff that I've ever done. It's like I look at the other works and they're all just kind of like down by the floor and this is at the ceiling. And how it got there, like I do not know, except that I did that thing where I was comfortable with risk. And I knew that there were areas where I needed to massage elements and that they needed to be anchored by things. And it's a story about 3 failed relationships. So there's 3 chapters of 3 different women. Gotcha. That the story kind of moves through. And so that kind of gave it this structure too, where it's like, it's a lot less daunting, to read this large document where you're kind of in this chapter form and you kind of know where you are in terms of the storytelling. And then that kind of freed me up to take risks elsewhere.
And I do want to say real quick, for those of you with the benefit of flash photography, the absolute joy on Scott's face as he is describing this film, and this is part of the reason why I do this shit audio. It's because it's like this is when people are recorded on camera, they're a bit more guarded. They don't want to let too much through. When it's just audio, people are a little bit more fluid. And when you said, "Oh, I've written the standard stuff before," like it dipped, but then you were like, "This is my fucking script," and just like that joy, I think is the best encapsulation of what we're talking about. Is just go ham, make it good, make it fit, cut off the loose extraneous edges for sure, but like if it feels good, do it.
All right, George Bush.
I technically I'm older, so he took it from me, so whatever.
Fair. No, but I think you're onto something, and I think and again, not to pivot, but just this idea, Hollywood responds to passion and confidence. And like, there's a reason that P.T. Anderson could make his movies at 24, because he just had like an ungodly amount of energy, we'll call it. And people respond to that. And I think like, there's something about this script. It's the weirdest, wildest thing. I'm not a religious person. And I've always felt like when writers kind of start to say something like this, that it's bullshit. But this is the only thing I've ever written where, as I was writing it, it felt like there was a presence with me in the room. And I didn't know if it was like a muse or a guide or an angel or whatever the fuck, but there was something else there. And more so than creating, I felt like I was channeling. I felt like things were just coming to me, and it was just my job to just grab them. And like so many of like what I think are like, if there's any brilliance here, like the brilliant ideas in a strange way, because the script is entirely about me and I am the named character, and me as the director wanders into frame to get into arguments with character Scott. And then there's like a bartender Scott, and there's like a little Scott on a mountain bike. There, you know, it's like this is like a fragmentation of selves, right? And so the strangest thing was that, like, you know, it felt like I was being guided, and it felt like it wasn't about me. It was about these feelings and these ideas and the kind of yearning and dreaming that we do in Los Angeles when we're not quite where we want to be, and when we're not quite with the person we want to be with. And it was about those kind of emotional states. And in the strangest fucking way, the only way to say it is that, like, it went so far up its own butt that it came out the other side.
Hey,
And
listen, people want to do that with black holes. So
yeah. The more personal it got, the more universal it got. And that was a very interesting exchange. And again, kind of like, you know, the thesis of this conversation is that, like, it was not asking for an invite. It was just standing on its own 2 feet and telling a story, and fingers crossed that others would find it interesting. And it turned out to be so. And so I think that, to me, is like the master lesson here is just like, great writing is great writing. It takes many shapes and forms. But to me, the biggest element is just the confidence of the writer in writing the exact script that they want to write.
There is, I when you were talking about that, something came to mind. I was watching, and this will date me as much as anything does. I was watching
Sure.
the Black Crowes Behind the Music.
It's fun.
From VH1. It's a channel that
Sure.
used to show music videos. Kids, look it up. Tell your dad. Ask your grandparents.
Sure.
But the lead singer, I think his name is Chris, or he was one of the brothers. But he basically said when they write a song, or when they write a lick, or when they write just a riff, whatever, that universal thing that you feel is either guiding you or that you are a part of. They call it the song. But I think in the creative space that we operate in, like, to borrow another phrase from Jason Isbell, that's the drugs and the money. Like, that's
Yes.
that's the thing we're here for, is the weirdest shit. I talked about this on a previous episode, Everything Everywhere All at Once. The weirdest shit. What
Incredible.
was it? It was a family drama about relationships and the
Anchored.
and
Excellent.
but then hot dog fingers. But I mean,
Yeah.
not to suggest that you should have added hot dog fingers into your script. Maybe
No, but
you
I
did.
I kind of did in my own little way, but I think that you're so right, because the spine of that story is a mother and a daughter. And the scene, oh my God, I'm going to cry just like describing it. The scene of them in the parking lot when they're just grappling with these generational feelings and these representations that, you know, we don't get that stuff on screen as much as we should. And that was a story told from the perspective of its creators in a way that was deeply authentic, and I think deeply personal, and it resonated across the globe. And, you know, it's like, to me, that's the perfect example of, I think that is the style of writing. And again, God knows, can you imagine a screenwriting, you know, teacher or professional or note giver or whatever getting that script on their desk? You would be horrified. You would quit. You would say, this I have to give so many notes.
I've seen too much. I'm going home.
I don't even know where to start. I'm going to get my real estate license. You know, I'm the fuck out of here. Like, yeah. And so I think that's the other thing too. Of course, the great William Goldman, nobody knows anything. And more than that, we all want different stuff from this industry. And I think some of us, like for me personally, I've always been pretty clear on this. My goal, I'm happy if I make one classic film and then burn out. That is a success.
Some would argue
a career would be nice. I'd love a career. Give me one just absolute fastball and I'm good. And if, you know, I would so much rather do that than make 17 mediocre movies and have a house in the hills.
Some would argue that it's better to burn out than to fade away. The classic Shakespearean character known as the Kurgan.
Yes.
But you know, in the short amount of time that we have left, and that's why I say please. This is the fastest half an hour in the business.
I love
because it's just,
we're fast talkers.
Well, I mean, what is it? Show up late and get out early. You know what I mean? You know what I'm talking about.
That's a good piece of marketing advice.
This is the kind of stuff that gets people to want in. It's not, hey, are you good at following rules? Hey, can you stick to under 120 pages? And if you're writing, TV under 60 or whatever, or half-hour comedies, things like that. It's not the nuts and bolts. It's not the formatting. If anybody gave a shit about the formatting, we're not building a car. We're not architects of a structure where life depends on it. We're telling human stories. Sometimes they're a little weird, but those are often the best ones. And we're just trying to do our best to communicate to each other authenticity. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that is the one thing in all of these arguments I just feel is almost clinical. It just doesn't feel authentic.
Because you're right, and I think what you're driving at something so key, because the subtext. And again, it's like when people are like, oh my God, you were out of your mind. And it's like, sure, yeah, maybe. But like, this was not about white space. This was about the attitude that young and developing writers should have towards their work and the areas of focus that they should be focused on. And like, again, for the zillionth time, some of these things are very advantageous, right? Like, following these rules will help you depending on what you want out of your career. But also on the flip side, we know that breaking them comes at a cost, and it also comes at an advantage, because those are the things that are interesting. If they are interesting, you could break every rule and just be like the most dull, unreadable script ever. Sure. And then you could follow every rule and be the most compelling, interesting script ever. So like, again, the writing is the writing is the writing. And so, every time someone says that they know how to do it or what it looks like, someone comes along and just totally proves them wrong. So I think for me, like, on a macro level, the only advice that's really worth listening to is watch movies, read scripts, work on your craft, and follow your instincts. Because there's this beautiful thing, and like, super quick, I can do this in like 2 minutes.
You've got one.
Okay. Writers, when you start, the easiest script you ever write is your first script, right? Because you're just like, you don't know what the fuck you're doing. So it's just fun. And you just write, and then you type the end. And then you start to learn the craft, right? And so, you go from this place, you start with just your pure instincts, and then you start to learn all the kind of methods, right? And the paradigms. And then you start to jettison that, because you realize, I don't need that. And you, as a writer, you return to your instincts, but you now have the benefit of this internalized craft. And that's where the magic happens. And what that looks like, who the hell knows? But I'm excited to see it. And like, let's aim for the top. Let's strive for greatness. Let's not strive for mediocrity. And like, whatever that looks like for you, Godspeed. And like, follow your instincts and your barometer, and the industry will fight and you will fight back. And that is this beautiful dance that we do in the City of Angels.
Absolutely wonderful way to wrap that up, Scott. Thank you very much for coming on Bolded Slugs today. Scott Ledger can be found at Scottery Barn on Twitter. We will have that linked in the show notes. Please check him out. And once again, thank you very much for your time today on Bolded Slugs. Bolded Slugs, the podcast, would like to thank our partners at filmsnobbery.com for hosting our show. Today's music is Sublime by Ken Ashari from the Free Music Archive, licensed under Creative Commons. Bolded Slugs, the podcast, is a Dapper Duck Media production.